answers. So years ago, I had maybe a 2-year-old, had my first child, and I went to see a friend, and she told me parenting is blissful 100% of the time. And I remember thinking, okay, really? Like, it can't be 100% of the time. I'm thinking, like, this is shameful. Like, I think it's more like 20% of the time. Like, I love my kid. Now I have 2 kids. I love them both. But it's a hard job, like really hard. So I thought there was something wrong with me. And so I've made it my mission to really talk about how hard parenting is and what we can do to make it easier so that we can enjoy our time with our kids more. So if you wouldn't mind, just if you feel comfortable, and if you don't feel comfortable, don't worry about it. But if you feel comfortable, put in the chat pane what your percentage is. We have a 60-40, 10-90. Thank you for your honesty. And I will say also about this, it changes, right? It's not like all the time it's one thing, but it really depends on what's going on in life. So we have such a range here, 40-60, 70-30. Okay, so parenting is not joyful all the time. We can all agree on that. It's hard. So if you think about your most blissful time with your kids, when everything is going amazingly, think about what are the things that happen that take you out of that take you away from that. What are the things that kind of get in the way from fully enjoying your time with your kids? Terry's a grandma. It's blissful 100% of the time. I am looking forward to that. Okay, so what takes you out of your blissful period? 9 times out of 10, what it is behavior, parenting chores, and exhaustion. Okay, those are the things that are happening. I cannot help with parenting chores. Like, kids still need to eat, they still need to be bathed, they still have to get to school. There's nothing I'm going to do here that's going to change that. Okay, but what I can do is take away some of the behavioral problems and improve some of the exhaustion. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I'm going to do a presentation, hopefully be a little interactive. I'm going to talk really fast because that's what I do. But then I'm going to save time for questions at the end. You can ask me anything I talk about in the presentation. You can ask me anything that's on your mind as a parent. I do want to recognize, I know this is a hard time to be a parent with all the things that are going on with, gun violence and just, it's a daily struggle. So we can talk more about that at the end. I won't address that much during the presentation, but I'm happy to at the end. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have a PhD in social welfare, and I've been working with children and families for 25 plus years now. When I started, I worked at an organization called Covenant House, and it was a shelter for teens, and I ran the long-term housing program. They stayed for about 18 months, and they had job skills and hopefully moved out onto their own. And after that, at Covenant House, I worked in a prevention program. So I made home visits in the 5 boroughs of New York City to prevent child abuse in teen parents. And it was amazing. I love this job. And visiting people in their homes made so much sense to me as a therapist and a clinician, because in my office, I only see so much. But if I show up at, dinner time, when the kids are getting home from school, like, I can really see a whole lot. And that's really stuck with me, the idea of home visits and the idea of understanding parenting. So at that time, part of my job was also teaching parenting classes. And I was not a parent. I was only a couple years out of social work school. And I knew child development. So I knew what I wanted to tell the parents, but I did not know anything about what the experience was of being a parent. So I cringe at how I must have been talking to these young moms, like, from a position of like cluelessness. So then I had my own children. And before I did, I had a fantasy of what it was going to be like. It was going to be amazing, right? I didn't think about the hard times. I just thought about the joy, right? So this is what I imagined. I imagined children that sleep through the night. They go to bed when we ask them to. I pictured like ice cream parties and going out in the snow. Now you see in this picture with kids happily playing in the snow, nobody's crying, nobody has to go potty, nobody got wet, nobody got a snowball in their face, like, everything is happy. this is not the reality of parenting. Okay. So here's what it is. These are my actual children. This is my husband. This is years ago. And we went to Sesame Place. Why I love this picture so much is look at the face of my daughter. That is a child who could not be more thrilled that her brother is crying. Okay, this is real life parenting. And it was the worst day. We went to Sesame Place. It was the worst day. So it isn't all what we dream it up to be. And sometimes that's why I ask us what our percentage is, because I think the more we recognize that this is a hard job, the more we realize it's not always easy, the more we sort of can laugh about some of the hard times, the easier it gets to recognize what we need to do next. Okay, so anyone feel this a little bit sometimes? Okay, so we all felt this so much during the pandemic that the New York Times created the Primal streamline. I don't know if anybody knew about this at the time, but you basically call it and scream, yell, like let off whatever's on your chest about how hard it is to be a parent. And just the idea that this is needed, you know, really shows like kind of what our state of mind has been. And I think it was this way before the pandemic, but obviously life still hasn't gone back to normal. So, you know, that's the situation that we've been in. Okay, so before we go on, I want to ask you to just let me know, what are the ages of your kids? And or if you're a grandparent, same thing. And this will be for the raffle. So you're not required to put anything in the chat pane, but if you do, your name will be entered into the raffle. So just let me know the ages of your kids, so I kind of understand, you know, who's in the room. My kids, just to let you know, I have a 15-year-old boy and I have an 18-year-old girl who's in college. Okay, I'm just taking a look. Okay, so we have from very, very young to teenagers to grown and flown kind of kids, older kids. The good news is this works with college age. People have always joked with me that this works with husbands and spouses. And so, you know, hopefully we'll go home with something tangible that will work for everybody in the room here. Okay, so anyone, if you're coming in late, just let me know how old your kids are. And then again, sorry, if you feel comfortable, think about one annoying behavior that your child does that drives you crazy. Like anything, taps the pencil, talks too much, speaks with their mouth full, like anything. Like, let's be real with each other about anything that's annoying, specifically annoying, that your kids do. Anyone have anything? Nonstop talking. That is my number one. That nearly put me over the edge in the pandemic. Doesn't communicate, throwing food, hitting me in the face, impulsive toddler behavior. Doesn't return texts, but expect you to immediately. I'm in touch with that. Insists on pooping in the diaper at age 4. Potty training. Okay, I do a lot of potty training. We're not going to talk specifically about potty training, but I think some of what we do here will be helpful. Throwing food on the floor. Okay, so just to give us some of an idea of what's annoying, I'm going to talk more specifically about what's annoying in a minute. Now think about when your kid is doing that annoying behavior when you're out in public, or you're out to dinner with grandma, or your parents, or something like that. However you feel when that annoying behavior happens, or that embarrassing behavior, it's 10 times worse when you're out in public. Okay. Okay, so here's what happened. I had my own kids, and I had been working in nonprofits for about 15 years. And I started to look around at the parents, you know, in my community, and realize that you shouldn't be at risk for losing your children to neglect and abuse to get some help in the home, that we all could use a little coaching sometimes. So I started my own private practice called The Family Coach, where I go into people's homes and help them with whatever's going on. So I usually ask parents, like, what's the hardest time of day for you? And that's the time that I go. I would say like 60% of the work I did was on sleep, getting kids to sleep, because it's one thing when your kids are really little and they're not sleeping, but it's a lot less cute when it's been going on for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and parents need a lot of help at that time. So I did a lot of sleep. I helped a lot with eating issues. Kids don't eat anything, very picky diet, that kind of thing. And then potty training, toddler behaviors, teenagers, and most parents call me when the kids are from like 5 months till about 7, then nothing in the middle, everything's good. And then 14, 15 years old, the calls start coming again about dealing with teens. So through this time, I started seeing the same kind of problems, the same struggles in every home. And it was kind of amazing. Sure, every home is different, but the same themes were happening. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about what they are, because I think that helps understand why kids are behaving in certain ways. And when we can understand it, then we can change some of that behavior. Okay, so I'm going to play a video just for a minute.
Catherine, we're not hearing the sound. Is there
Oh,
sound?
no?
No.
Okay. Maybe because I have my headphones on. Well, this is good news for all of you. I'm going to spare you having the most annoying song in your head for the rest of the day. It's Watch Me. It's that like Watch Me, Nay, Nay. I cannot sing a single note, so I will not sing it for you all. But the point of me showing you this is they say watch me 73 times. And it really makes me think about how we're parenting our kids, and we're raising them to need attention. They're needing us to watch them do stuff all the time. I remember when my kids were little, you know, there was Baby Einstein. It was a video for like 23 minutes. And I remember the beginning of the video, she would say, you know, sit down and watch it with your children and talk to your children about it. And I'm thinking, this is the 23 minutes I have to do something else. Like my kid is strapped in or watching a video. Like I cannot watch them all the time. Same thing with like, you know, toys and blocks. It's always like helping your kid enjoy this toy instead of just leaving your kids to enjoy the toys on their own. And so the problem is, you know, when kids grow up expecting a lot of attention, it's impossible to kind of fill that need at all times. So when we have a newborn, we have to fill their needs all the time when they have them. You know, that's how they have a secure attachment. But as they grow over the next couple of years, we can meet their needs more sporadically. We can meet it more delayed. We don't have to meet every single need when it happens. But that's not what's happening. We are all helicopter parents now. It used to be we could point to this one and they're helicopter. No, we are all helicopter parents. It's almost what's expected of us. And it's very hard to some extent step away from that. So what's happening to our kids when they are used to getting so much attention? Okay, well, I saw this and I thought, oh my gosh, there's never anything more appropriate. Can you die from listening to your kids talk about YouTube videos? Because it feels like you could die from it. So when I saw this, I was like, this is exactly my point. Kids have this need to talk to us about things that used to be, we would just play. We would talk to our friends about it, but now we need our parents to enjoy it. So it's like, Dad, watch me play these Legos. Mom, watch me climb this tree. Let me show you this dive. Watch this replay of this video game. I mean, if you have older kids, you watch some replay of some stupid video game and you're like, why am I doing this? Watch me, watch me, watch me. That is an epidemic with our kids. And I'm exaggerating, but you get the idea. Someone just let me know in the chat pane if you have a kid that's watch me. Okay, well, I'll wait for anybody to write in. But anyway, if you have a kid that's expecting a lot of parental feedback, then think about what would be different if you didn't reward them for asking you all the time, if you did something differently. Someone said, no, but certainly my daughter wants me to participate in everything she plays with. Mm-hmm. Watch me when we're out. Okay, so the second thing that's sort of plaguing us is parenting in public. So again, back in the day before cell phones, we could parent, not have to worry about being blasted on the internet for something we've done with our children. And even if you haven't been outed for something you've done parenting, you have seen it on Facebook. You have seen some other parent be shamed for something that you might have done, like something small to something big. I remember one time I had my kid in the back of the car and I ran inside and I brought my groceries in. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I just left my kid in the car. Like, it wasn't very long. It was like probably 2 minutes, but it was something that I had seen other people be shamed for. So now knowing that people are watching us and are hyper vigilant on judging parents, it changes the way we parent. So I have a couple of examples. So a couple of years ago, my daughter, so I live in California now, but we're from New York. And my daughter was going on a trip to DC, and all the parents bring their kids to the bus. My daughter may have been in like 8th grade. We go to the bus from Southern California, and everybody's in jeans, sweatshirts, and my daughter's in shorts and a t-shirt. And I'm like, if she's cold, she'll put her pants on. And I hear people, so when I moved here, I didn't know very many people, so people don't know me either. So I hear people behind me talking about my daughter, who's the only one in shorts. And she's saying like, look at that kid in shorts. She's gonna be freezing. Like, I would never let my kid go out like this. Meanwhile, I'm hearing this. I'm thinking to myself, if she gets cold, she'll put her pants on. Like, I am comfortable with this. What is it your problem? Like, she is not even your child. And that just kind of really upset me, because I felt like, should I have done something different? Should I have intervened? Okay, well, fast forward a couple of months later, my daughter is dress coded at school, and I write a tongue-in-cheek article to the principal, but I posted on my blog, basically saying like, you take my daughter shopping, like it's impossible to get her something that fits on the dress code. And it went viral. And like, footnote, the dress code was changed eventually in my school district, but it was a big deal. It got around a lot. Excuse me.
Wait, additional footnote, just so everybody in our community knows, this is the post that we saw on Facebook years later, right? Because Catherine, I believe your daughter is now in college, and this was when she was in high school. But this was the post that I saw, and I appreciated so much Catherine's response. That's what made me say, wait a minute, we need to find out who this mom is and who this doctor is and what she's saying and how we ended up here tonight. So I appreciate this post a lot.
Yeah, it actually goes around every year because unfortunately we're still dealing with the dress code. But it went viral, so you can only imagine what happened next, right? Okay, so these are some of the comments that I received from just saying that I'm having difficulty with the dress code. People can't just disagree with me. That her mom dresses her 12-year-old skank, like a 12-year-old skank too. We both need to sit in detention. Future parent of a knocked up dropout, trashy. Okay, like you saw the pictures. I'm gonna go back. This is my actual daughter. Those are the shorts that she's wearing. That's what she wore to school. Okay, so it's not even like she was like even close to scantily dressed. Anyway, my point is that we are all dealing with a community of people, whether we're friends with them or not, who feel the need to talk to us about our parenting, to judge us, to instruct us. So what do you think happens when you're in Starbucks and your kid starts throwing a tantrum because you won't give them a hot chocolate? Are you going to let them fall on the floor kicking and screaming, or are you going to give them the hot chocolate? And very often we just kind of give in because people are watching, and it's very hard to be firm. So no becomes a yes. And there are major consequences of this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so here we're getting to the crux of it. Why do kids whine, complain, tantrum, curse, negotiate, beg, provoke, annoy? Because it works. Okay, when I was talking about annoying behaviors, these are some of the ones that usually come up the most often, like baby talk, whining, complaining. These things, kids talking back, are the things that drive parents crazy and take some of the joy and bliss out of parenting. And if we could eliminate that, we can, actually enjoy our time with our kids a little bit more. So what I have learned is that our children are very smart cookies. And what's amazing is they're smart even at 1 and 2 years old. They have it figured out. They realize that there are two ways they can get what they want. They can get something that the two ways that these things, the way it works is they get something that they want. So they do all these things and it gives them something that they want, or they do all these things and it takes something away that they don't want. Okay, so I'm going to give you two stories to explain. And let me know if this sounds like any of your children. I actually have both of these kids. So the first person is a collector, the kid. So you go to Target, you say to your kid, nothing for you. We're running in really quickly. We have to buy a birthday present for Sarah. It's going to take 5 minutes and we're going to get in the car and that's it. Don't ask me for anything. A collector loves collecting. And there's all kinds of adorable things that they can get at Target. And the parent tells the kid, you can go play. I'll tell you when I'm ready in the toy aisle. And then immediately the child starts negotiating for a toy. Couldn't I just have this? Just one small one. Oh, this one's on sale. On and on with the parent. And the parent is rushing. Imagine this is not your happiest day. You've had a really bad day till you got to this point, and your kid is pushing, and finally you're just like, fine. Not more than $5 though, right? So you feel like you've compromised. Well, what does the kid learn? The kid learns that all of that negotiation, all of that pestering works like a charm. They should try to do that more often. The second kind of kid is the negotiator. And this kid doesn't like carrots. And so when the parent brings the meal, it could be peas, it could be chicken, it could be hot dog, it could be anything. When the parent gives this to the child immediately starts with, I don't like those. And the parent engages. Well, you have to eat your carrots and, it's good for you. And you have to eat vegetables, the whole thing. So the kid starts in with, well, can I just have one? And the parent says, no, you have to eat them all. I can't eat them all. How about 3? I'll do 3, but I won't complain at all. Just let me only have 3 and I won't complain. And the parent, who again, every meal is dealing with the same behavior, is very tempted to just say, fine, just eat 3. So some of the unwanted thing is removed and the child only has to eat 3 carrots. How wonderful that behavior was for the child. How unhappily, uncomfortable, miserable that behavior might be for the parent. Does this kind of thing sound familiar to anyone? So it's basically they misbehave to get something that they want or to get rid of something that they don't want. Okay, so how do I know this? This is B.F. Skinner. You may have learned about him if you took a psychology class in college. I love this guy. He studied behavior, and I also very much like to study behavior. And what he thought was, if you wanted to know why a child, a human, an adult, an animal did something, you had to see what they got out of it. What came after the behavior? Okay, 2 examples. If I go and I touch a hot pot, burn my hand, I'm going to say, ouch, that really hurt. I don't think I should do that again, right? So what happened immediately after the behavior was undesirable. I'm not going to do that again. Or imagine the same thing happened with the pot, but like a rainbow and a pot of gold comes when I touch it. I'm like, give me that pot. I want to touch it over and over and over again and see how many rainbows and pots of gold I can get. So realize that you have to look at what happens when you see that behavior, what happens immediately after. And he did lots of research on like pigeons and rats to see that over and over and over again, if it was something good that happened after the behavior, it was repeated. And if it was something that was not desirable, it went away. And I've seen the same thing a million times over in children. So if it works in rats and pigeons, I promise you it also, the same applies for children. Excuse me. So if you take away one thing, here it is. Behavior that has a reward will be repeated. Okay, behavior that has reward repeated. That's what happens immediately after the behavior. So if the child whines and complains and does all those things and they get something they want, or they get out of doing something that they don't want, it will happen more often. So there are 4 kinds of rewards to think about, because sometimes we think more concretely about rewards, but rewards can happen in different ways. So the first kind of reward is material, like Starbucks, or they get a treat, a cookie, or even something that's not like physically material, but they get 5 more minutes of television, or, you know, they're getting something specific for their behavior. So that you tell the child it's time to turn the TV off, and they're like, no, 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 please, 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 5 more minutes. And you're like, okay, fine, 5 more minutes. Well, the kid is never going to learn to turn the TV off when you ask if every time they negotiate for something. That's a reward. The second kind of reward is something unpleasant is removed. That's like the carrots that I talked about. And then the third kind of reward is attention. We just talked about how much kids need attention. And I don't want to say that you shouldn't give your kids attention. They need lots of attention. We should give it to them, but we shouldn't give it to them when they're doing something that is undesirable. And I'll talk more about what kind of things that is. And then the last kind of reward that makes parents uncomfortable, but you know, kids do this, is their reward is making the parent angry. So imagine you have a child who wants to do something and you said no, and for whatever it is, a no is a no. It's not even negotiable. You can't do it. They want to play with the stove, something like obviously concrete they can't do. And they're really angry. And so what do they want? If they cannot play with that stove, then at least they can get you angry also. And this is very common with toddlers and teens. And if you think about it, they're both very similar. They both have this idea that they need independence, that they can do more than they can actually do. And it's very frustrating to still have rules and limitations imposed on you when you think you should be able to be free and do all these things. So getting a parent angry, especially for a toddler and a teen, is a type of reward, especially when they see that what they want is just not going to happen. All right. So now we know that kids need a lot of attention. And if they don't get it the good way, they're going to get it in a less desirable way. We know that behavior that has a reward will be repeated. We've discussed the kind of rewards and why children might misbehave. All right, so how do we change it? Changing behavior is simple. People love it when I say that. Obviously, it's not so simple, but if you eliminate the benefits and the rewards of the behavior disappears. Now, I have seen this a million times, and I've worked with families one-on-one and in big groups, and initially it sounds impossible, like there's no way these things will work. And then I just say to the parent, if what you're doing isn't working, maybe try one other thing. And when they try it, they feel such a change, and I'll explain it. If you remove the reward, the child's going to see this is not very efficient. This is not working for me. So I should not bother with this, and I should try something that it will work. So again, if the hot pot is hot, I'm not going to do it anymore. So if nothing desirable comes, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give you 2 examples. First is my sister Leah, spelled same as this Leah here. She's older than me, 3 years older. So she liked to torture me as a child with big words in the dictionary. I mean, again, if this is the worst she did, I guess this isn't terrible, but it was not pleasant for me. And every time I would go yelling and screaming to my mother that my sister called me facetious again, and I just would be so up in arms. Of course, I get older and I realize I too can look in the dictionary, and I realize she's just calling me big words. And all of a sudden, I stop yelling and screaming to my mother. I don't bother with it. And guess what happens? My sister stops using big words on me because it has no effect on me whatsoever. Okay, so you can see how it works. I remove the behavior. I remove the reward. The behavior stopped. Okay, the second one I'm going to give. Now, if you have a dog, this will make a lot of sense to you. If you don't have a dog, you'll think like I'm not a good person because I'm connecting dog training with raising your children, but just hear me out for a second. I got a puppy years ago, and her name is Norma. And Norma was being crate trained. And of course, we put her in the crate at night, and she would cry all night long. So we would go down, and it was just her, and we would try and get her to calm down. And then she would be quiet, and we'd go back up. And as soon as we go back up, she would whine and cry again, and we'd come back down again. And we would do this all night long. And I was like, I know this can't be right. Like, I feel like I'm rewarding her for crying. And of course, that's exactly what I was doing. So we also tried like a version, like we tried like banging loud pots. Nothing worked. She wanted to see us, and she would do anything to do it. And so eventually we just said, like, you've got potty. and you've been fed, and now it's time for sleep. There's nothing more I need to do for you. You can cry if you want to. I'm not coming down. Lo and behold, 3 days later, she goes in the crate, no crying, everything's great. Why? Because I removed the reward, the behavior just goes away. So this is very similar to raising our children. If we remove the reward, the behavior goes away. The last thing I want to say as an example is, I read a really interesting research study where they applied the same ideas of ignore it, which I'm going to talk about, and this idea of removing the rewards in terms of limiting bullying in schools. So what they did is, instead of, bullies get a lot of attention. It's negative attention, but they get a lot of attention, and that is also reinforcing for them. So what they did is they taught the whole school, we are going to recognize when there's bullying, but instead of giving attention to the bully, we go to give all of our attention to the target of the bullying. We say no to the bully, and then we turn all of our attention to the other person. Well, that becomes very not so fun for the bully. And it worked. They studied it, and the bullying behavior decreased. So I think it's just such a really interesting way of seeing the same kind of procedure working in a variety of different settings. Okay, so ignoring annoying attention-seeking behavior and button pushing behavior will make it go extinct. So extinction is a term from like positive and negative reinforcement and behavioral training. And it just means that the behavior disappears. So positive reinforcement is when you give something, you give a reward, and negative is when you take something away, like when we take away those carrots. And both of those are still reinforcement, and they still encourage children to do the same behaviors again. But if we change the way we respond by ignoring those behaviors, not ignoring the child, just the behavior momentarily, if we momentarily ignore those behaviors, the child will see this isn't working, I should do something different. I'm going to give you 2 examples again. If we go back to the picky eater, and it's now breakfast, and the parent asks the child, do you want eggs or do you want Cheerios? And the child says, I want Cheerios. And the parent gives the Cheerios like they do every single day in the same way they do every day. And the child's like, I don't want those Cheerios. That one looks funny. I don't like this bowl. You put too much milk in, fill in the blank. If you have a picky eater, this should sound very, very familiar. And the parent doesn't respond. Now, imagine if the parent does respond, then every day this continues because this is super fun. I can get you to give me a different bowl. I can get you to give me a different lunch or breakfast or whatever it is. This is a super fun game for kids. So if the parent doesn't respond and decides like, this is what you asked for, this is what I've given you, now it's really up to you to eat it. It's amazing what happens when a parent separates from that intense power struggle. The child will decide on their own if they want to eat it or not, but it's not because the parent says you should eat it or not eat it. It's amazing what happens. It changes the whole dynamic. And then same thing about if you went to the store, you went to Target, you brought the kid, you said, I'm not buying you anything. The kid begs and pleads. You make it out of there with nothing, and you don't offer any attention. You ignore all the whining. The next time you go to Target, the kid's going to say, maybe I just play. And then we go, because I'm wasting all my time begging for something that's not coming. And I didn't even enjoy myself. I might as well just go ahead and play. So that's what happens. One thing that happens is sometimes behavior gets worse before it gets better. And that is called an extinction burst. And why that happens is if a child has been using a certain behavior for a long period of time, and it's been working very well, that negotiating usually gets them a later bedtime or gets them to skip bath, or whining and complaining gets them something that they want. If they've been doing this for a long time, when you start to ignore it, they're not really going to believe you that nothing's coming, right? Because it always works, or it works, even if it works 1 out of 10 times, they're going to keep going for it. So sometimes they say, okay, I need to try harder. Okay, so I was asking for a cookie, I didn't get it. And my dad said, like, no, you've already had one dessert, and I'm still whining and begging for it, and nothing happens. Now I'm gonna go to level 10. I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna scream, you never give me anything, but all the things, and try and wear the parent down. often that works. You know, imagine you've had a long day, you've been at work, you lost your job, you don't feel well. When we are not at our best parenting, that's when we tend to give in and the child learns. But if we don't do that, the child ramps it up and nothing comes, they think to themselves, okay, that really did not work. That was not useful at all. And usually it only takes like 2 or 3 times for the child to protest you're ignoring it until they realize, okay, wait, nothing really is coming. I should just try something else, like earning my rewards through point system that you set up, or being kind and getting praise and attention that way, or cleaning up my room and getting praise and attention that way. So they learn to try another way. But the extinction burst, a lot of parents get very upset. They're like, it's not working, it's getting worse. And I say, that's actually a sign it is working. The kid is really getting the message, just give it a couple more days. Oh, I lost there we go. Okay. So what actually is ignore it? Ignore it is a very simple process of briefly ignoring a behavior that's undesirable. And I'll talk in the next slide about what specifically I'm talking about, but those like whining, complaining, tantruming behaviors, those undesirable, annoying things. When your child presents that way, you are going to ignore it briefly. You're not going to leave the room. You're not going to go out for 10 minutes and be like, I can't be with you. It's a momentary, selective ignoring. You're only pretending to ignore, because as soon as the child stops the behavior, and I mean like immediately, you re-engage like it didn't happen. So the kid has been begging for a cookie or begging for 5 more minutes of television, and you ignore it. As soon as it stops, you just move on with your day. Like, oh, what would you like for dinner? Oh, did I tell you grandma's coming? You just re-engage the child, because if you don't re-engage, it's just going to ramp up like it does in timeout. If you don't re-engage a child quick enough, they're going to start to get into trouble again. So you ignore the behavior briefly, but you're only pretending to ignore. You're listening. As soon as it stops, you re-engage. That's the third step. The fourth step doesn't always happen. But let's say part of the behavior was throwing books around the playroom, or throwing food on the floor, or doing something that they know. I don't mean like a little kid, but that they know they're not allowed to do. So after you re-engage, you say, okay, I could see that you had been very upset. Please clean up the toys, or please apologize to your sister for hitting her, or whatever that might have been. And then you move on completely. The whole point of this is that it's very quick. The child is not hearing your words. Like, you are not yelling, you are not lecturing, you are not explaining why they shouldn't be throwing toys or hurting people. You're not doing any of that. You are just quickly ignoring the behavior until it stops, and then you're re-engaging. So the kind of things that you can ignore: attention-seeking behavior. These are the things that our kids are nudging us to get a response. If you have a kid that does something attention-seeking, you want to put in the chat pane, do that. That might be helpful for other people. Every kid is different, but they know what your buttons are. Kids know instinctively what your buttons are, and they push them so that we can react. Again, even a negative attention, even getting us mad, is a reward. A battle of wills. Anything that happens immediately after no. And when parents are first starting to ignore certain behaviors, this is a great way to start. Don't worry about ignoring anything. Just ignore what happens after you say no. You don't have to say no. But if you said no to something like no dessert, or no more TV, or no whatever, bike ride, we don't have time. If you said no, then no has to be no. And then immediately what happens after no, that you can ignore. If there's whining, complaining, tantruming, negotiating, all that. Cursing or disrespectful behavior. This is something that parents really want to engage in. It's like almost like impossible for us not to want to engage when our kid says a bad word at us, or is being disrespectful, slamming doors, getting really angry. And I encourage you not to do that for a couple of reasons. One is kids are allowed to be angry, and they may not have the skills to show it appropriately yet, but they are angry. And we need to facilitate that in a more appropriate way, but allow them to show some of their anger. But two, the quickest way to get your kid to curse and be disrespectful more often is to say, don't say that, you're really hurting my feelings. And the kid is like, thank you for telling me. Now I know exactly what to do to hurt your feelings, and to get you angry when I am angry. So imagine like you have even a young child who doesn't even know what the word means. Like, I don't know, can I say a bad word? Like let's say you have like a 4-year-old that, this happened to me once. I'm backing out of the pediatrician's office and I hit like a big cement pole and I say shit. And my kid immediately hears me say shit. And then of course he's like shit. And I'm like, this is a perfect example. So my inclination is to say, don't say that. You can't say that, because if I don't address it, my kid's going to say shit all the time. And I'm going to be like a bad parent and be called into preschool. It's going to be all bad. But as soon as I say, don't say that, the kid is like, oh, okay, I should say it more often. Like, what they hear is, you're telling me that that's an important word in your life and I should do it more, because look at the reaction and look at the attention I'm getting. So that's an example of why, your kid is cursing, whether they mean it or not. Just ignore it. I promise it'll go away quickly if you don't make it a thing.
Catherine, Leon is wondering, how do you ignore intentional ignoring from the kids' perspective?
Oh, that's a totally different ballgame that we don't ignore. Like, the kids are not entitled to ignore us when we ask them to do something. That's something different. And I'll talk about that. They're not allowed to ignore us for that kind of stuff. Okay, begging, pleading, whining, and anything annoying. Anything annoying is really important, because like, imagine you have a kid with ADHD, or it's just kind of like that kid that's just kind of annoying. Like, he does a lot of annoying stuff. Like, he's always like falling off his chair, or she's like, making a mess at dinner, or like whatever, like just annoying stuff. So as a parent, we feel like it's our job to teach our kids all the time. Like, we should be improving them and teaching them all the time. But if you engage with that, first of all, you might teach your kid, I should do this because I'm getting a reaction. But even when your kid is doing it and they have no idea they're being annoying, we shouldn't discipline it, because that is who your kid is. Your kid is a mess. Your kid is, very active. And the more you kind of try to put that into a box and try and change that, then all your kid hears is, you don't accept me. I can't not do the thing you're asking me to not do. And it ends up affecting their self-esteem. So if you have a kid that's just annoying because of who they are, just keeping it real, kids do annoying things, just ignore it, because you don't want to make them, even if they're not doing it on purpose, you don't want to make them feel bad about these things that they're doing that maybe they can't control. So there are things you cannot ignore, right? We can't ignore all behavior. So when someone's crying from real pain, real sadness, that is very different than tantrumy kind of crying. When your kid is really truly upset about something, we don't ignore that. We need to engage in that kind of stuff. When your child is in danger, or someone else can get hurt, like, I remember years ago, I was in the supermarket with my neighbor, and her kid was all over the place. He definitely needed much more supervision. And there was like one of those like big displays of like cans or some boxes or something, like huge thing. And I see in like slow motion the kid like trying to pull, and then the whole thing comes down. And I'm thinking, this is not a behavior we should be engaging, right? We should be ignoring. We should be engaging. We should be monitoring that. If your kid is in danger, someone else is in danger, there's vandalism, stealing, anything that's illegal. If you have a teenager who's being obnoxious for the sake of being left alone, don't ignore that, because that's what they want. They want to be left alone. They want to be not have to go. So it's like, you tell them we're all going to grandma's for Sunday dinner, and immediately on Wednesday they're complaining and trying to get out of it, and all this stuff happens. And by Sunday, you're so fed up with this kid, and you can't even imagine this going well with grandma, that you just say, forget it, don't come. Well, that was the point of the behavior. Now the kid got what they wanted. Another example is at the playground. A kid isn't happy at the playground and wants to go home, and you're like, no, we're staying here till 4 or whatever it is. So the kid acts really, unpleasant. And then you say, don't stop, we're going to go home. Again, that's the point. The kid wants to go home. So those are things we shouldn't ignore. And the last thing we shouldn't ignore is the good stuff. So just like behavior that isn't rewarded goes extinct, that is true for bad behavior, and that is also true for good behavior. So a lot of times, parents, if you think about it, we say no to our kids, we discipline our kids, we correct our kids so many more times a day than we recognize them for the good stuff that they do. And if nobody's paying attention to the good stuff, it's going to go extinct, just like the other stuff we're talking about. So I like to help parents think about this as like, you, if you're working, and you do this huge project for your boss and you've worked on it for weeks and you're super proud of it, and you turn it in and your boss says nothing, like nothing. Like, how hard do you think you're going to try on that next report? You know, you might try a little bit less. You might try a little bit less. You might not, you know, go all out. No reaction. Things are going to be happening less often. So I really, really ask you as parents, pay attention to the stuff your kids are doing well and reward them for that stuff. That will increase. Behavior that has a reward will be repeated. So if you reward the good stuff, that will be repeated. And if you ignore some of the undesirable stuff, that stuff will go away more. This is my son emptying the dishwasher. I hate emptying the dishwasher. So that's why I have kids. They don't like it either, but they have to do it as their chore. I make sure every single time, I mean, every time. This picture of my son looks, I don't know, he looks like 12. He's 15 now. I see still doing the dishwasher. I'm still saying thank you every single day. Why? Because I do not want to empty the dishwasher. I want him to know how appreciative I am. And then again, his efforts pay off. Okay. So if you have a kid who doesn't do a whole lot of good stuff, you need to pay closer attention. Reward your kid, even if it's a minor good, even if it's a little good, even if you can see they're trying, but they haven't gotten it yet. Change your expectations so that you can find ways to reward your kids. And especially if you have a kid you've been struggling with, that's the one you really want to find the rewards even more, because they really need it and your relationship needs it. One other thing I want to say about ignore it is, because you're actually ignoring behavior, ignoring means you cannot be speaking. And if you are a yeller, if you get angry easily and you say things that you might regret, this is a great way for you to not engage and not say something that you might regret when your child is pushing your buttons. But also what happens, what I've heard from a lot of parents, is they immediately feel this relief that they don't have to address everything. It's exhausting as a parent sometimes to feel like we're constantly teaching our kids and we have to always make things better. And that can be really difficult. So just not having to address everything makes parents automatically feel better. That's a huge benefit. Okay, we're almost towards the end and then I'll answer some questions. So other super important thing I want to leave you with, if you say no to something, you must leave it as no and follow through and make it a no. So I used to go to no very easily. Like, can we do whatever? No, like it just came out. Sometimes I didn't even mean it. And I'd want to then say like, oh no, well, we actually have time for a movie. We could watch a movie. That is a big no-no, because if you say no and then you overturn, your kids realize that no doesn't mean anything. And as a parent, if your kid can just respect no, that can alleviate a lot of difficult feelings. The other really important thing that parents really don't think about is, if you're having a bad day, you don't feel well, you're really not up to following through, just say yes, right? So give them more TV time. They say they want 5 more minutes. Okay. Nothing terrible is going to happen. They want a second piece of pizza and they want ice cream at breakfast. If you are not in the mood, you are having a very bad day, nothing terrible will be happening if you say yes. So tomorrow you'll feel better. You'll get your strength up. You'll say no tomorrow. It's just, if you say no, you have to follow through. So if you're feeling like you're just not having a good time, say yes. And this was actually one of my rules in the pandemic. It was like, if I can say yes, yes. Like, what, can we make a 12-layer cake? Yes. Can we, whatever. Like, one day my kid unrolled all of the wrapping paper in the house and they played with that for days. Like, yes, yes, yes. All the yeses. If you're not in the mood, just say yes. Again, as long as it's obviously not dangerous. And then I just want to leave you with this. If there is something that we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it is not something that could better be changed in ourselves. You cannot make your kid eat. You cannot make your kid behave. You cannot make your kid go on the potty, but you can change the way you act. And very often when you make those changes, it changes how your child responds. It's amazing. So sometimes taking the responsibility ourselves for our behavior can change our own kids' behavior. Okay. I am going to open it up for questions. I don't know, Leah, if you want to read them or if there's anything that you found. Oh, can I just say one other thing? I wanted to answer the question about if your kid is ignoring you, because that's really important. So kids ignore us because they can. So you say clean up, they don't do it. Well, they know maybe you'll do it in the end, or they can do a rush job, or they'll get someone else to help them, or they won't have to do it. They dilly-dally in getting up to bath because there's no consequence, and maybe you'll decide, forget it, we don't have time, or, you know, there's just no consequences. So the way to get your kids to listen to you so they are not ignoring you is to give them a command, give them a second to sort of think about it, and then tell them if they don't do it, what will happen. So you need to go up for bath, and the kid's like running around, dilly-dallying. Why? Because they don't have to. But then you say, if you don't get bath done by 7:30, we won't have time for stories. So my kid was very motivated by books and stories. And if I took that away, that was serious to her. So that would get her going. She knew what the consequence was. Now, every now and then, you're going to have to follow through with that consequence. And it is going to be terrible. It's going to be a terrible tantrum when you follow through with whatever you said, that I'm going to take away the iPad if you can't turn it off and, you know, by 8 o'clock, or whatever the thing, whatever the consequence you say you're going to impose, you have to impose. And it will be like war. The bigger the tantrum, the more you know you're getting through. But then the very next time the kid is, you say it's time for bath, the kid dilly-dallies, you say, okay, I'm just letting you know, if you don't get it done by 7:30, we won't have time for a story. What? I hate it when I lost story last time. I'm going to run up and immediately go to bath. My daughter was very motivated by dessert. My son could care less. So you have to really think about what's the right consequence for the right kid in the right situation. Like I used to take we'd go for like someone's birthday out to like Japanese steakhouse, and you'd always get ice cream. Those days I knew I could get my daughter to listen, because I would say, if you don't put your backpack away, you're going to lose your ice cream at dinner. She would get right in line. There was one time she didn't. She lost her ice cream. My entire family still talks about it. She was weeping the entire time. Everybody ate their ice cream. It was horrible. She never made the same mistake again. She got the consequence. So in order for, if your kids aren't listening, it's because they're asking, like, what are you going to do about it? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so then I can see everyone, but maybe someone can stop share. There we go. Can read me the questions, or
so
mute, whatever.
Question as to whether or not this can work between siblings too. She has one girl who antagonizes and gets reactions out of her sister.
100%. I've been in many homes where I've seen the dynamic. Sometimes it's mutually provoking. It's just one takes it a step too far. And, but often there's just a nudger, someone who's trying to annoy to get a reaction. And yes, you can teach your kid to ignore it. I taught my son to do it. He did it on the bus with a bully. He was pushing his chair. He was saying things. And he came home and he was like, yeah, I ignored it. And he stopped. And I was like, wow, good job. I will say my son has read my book. So if I ever get into like a discussion with my daughter after I've said no, he'll like yell from the other room, Mom, ignore it. And I'm like, he's right. I am ignoring it. I'm done here. I told you no. Yeah, I think it works for siblings for sure. The reason I was taking a second to think about it was sometimes you're ignoring the kid doing the behavior, but the sibling is reinforcing it by giggling. That makes it difficult. So you need to remove the giggling sibling in order to give the full ignoring consequence to the child. That's the only complication.
Perfect. And then Shari had a follow-up as to, what if you have a special needs child who likes to ignore the parent? What if you have a special needs child who likes to ignore the, I mean, you can still impose consequences, but you have to realize what makes sense for your child. So some children, and I would say very few, do not respond to a consequence, but the real trick is to finding the right consequence for the child. So, removing digital devices. With a special needs kid, same with younger kids, it has to be a more immediate consequence. So you can't say like, I'm going to take away something from tomorrow or later tonight. It needs to be something more immediate. That helps.
What gets attention repeated? I'm not sure I understand the question. Allison, can you say it, say a little more?
I said what gets attention gets repeated.
Right, exactly.
What you, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Sherry did have a previous question. I'm not sure if it was answered. It was more along the lines of a healthy amount of attention. How do you determine that between kids wanting the attention and you also needing your time?
Yeah, I mean, I think kids should be able to play on their own for some period of time, depending on age. And I think working towards that can help. I think that there are some activities that don't require a parent to look. And I think, look, all kids are gonna be like, Dad, look and see this thing I built. We should give our kids attention, but I think it's the constant attention that becomes more difficult. So you might be able to say, Jared, I would like for you to play on your own for 20 minutes. I'm going to set this timer. And then when you are done, I will come in and see what you've built. Rather than, look at this one, look what I added, look at this one. What do you think of this? Do you think too much? Can I talk more about teens? I love teens. I think they get a bad rap. I think that they are going through a lot, and they really push our buttons. But I think one thing that happens with parents is that when they get to the teen years, they don't shift their parenting. So you can't parent a 15-year-old like you did a 5-year-old. But very often we don't make that switch. And so that's where a lot of the head banging happens and the button pushing and the battle of wills, because the kids are really needing more independence, more trust, more ability to be out with their friends and to do more things in the community. And what I can say is that from what I am reading, from what we're seeing, kids are not doing well when they get to college. They're not prepared for college. And part of that is because as parents, we have not shifted to allow teens to grow and make mistakes and be more independent. And it's not easy. It is not easy at all to let your teen make big mistakes, or go out driving somewhere where they haven't gone before, or go out with friends, or have a late curfew, or all these things are very hard as parents. But we need to push ourselves to do them in order to prepare our kids. I once saw Julie Lifcott-Haynes speak, and she used to be a Stanford dean of students. And she wrote a book about adulting. I forget what it's called, but I saw her speak, and she said something, and I do this for a living, and she said something that really changed the way I was with my kids. And she said, the job of parents is to put ourselves out of a job. And when you think of it that way, we have to constantly be thinking, how are we preparing our teenagers for the rest of life outside of our house? And a lot of the times we're too stressed and scared to let them really do the things that they need to do in order to be successful. And so what I have found is if you can say yes more with safety, safety net for your kid, for your teen, it can alleviate a lot of the arguments. That doesn't mean you can let your kid do everything. Of course not. They have to be safe, and they have to earn their trust. You have to give them small bits of independence and then build on it. But I think that teens have had a very difficult time during the pandemic. I think even before the pandemic, depression, anxiety, and suicidality is skyrocketing. And that's for a lot of reasons. But as parents, what we do at home actually makes a big difference. And so I joked with my daughter before college. She would say, I can't open this cheese stick. And I would say, well, do you want to eat cheese sticks in college? Because you're going to have to figure that out. And just it became a joke in this house, but it was really a sign, I need to step back. I need to let you figure things out and, make messes and make mistakes and then learn from them to prepare them. But Ignore It works amazing with teens because they really know how to push your buttons and rile you up. They can read you like a book. And so if my child wants to go out and it's 11 o'clock at night and I say, no, it's too late, it starts the school night, and then she's arguing with me, I'm done. I don't have to engage anymore. Now she can yell and scream and slam the door and curse. No problem. She's angry. I'm seeing she's angry. I don't have to address that. But I could ignore it and let her express her anger. She's still not going out. But as parents, we want to engage in that. And then again, that's where our relationship kind of falls apart.
Do you mind if I just verbally follow up on that?
Yeah.
We have a kid that's really probably we've done a lot of wrong things already. So it's gotten to the point where she doesn't get up in the morning. Then she goes to school and skips class. And then after class, she goes where she's told not to go. You know, you don't have the same level of control. Or you say no and they slam doors, but then when you're not looking, they sneak out and start disappearing on you. You know, that kind of, like, it's hard to ignore in those situations.
Well, yeah, I agree. And there's only certain things you can ignore. Part of what is really helpful with teenagers, especially ones that are struggling, is natural consequences. So I think a lot of times as parents, we want to prevent them from getting a failing grade or missing a test or not getting to play basketball that day. And so we rescue them in lots of ways that reinforces the behavior. And I think when they feel natural consequences, even the best consequence is one that we don't have to give them, right? Because we're not to blame. And the kid learns from their mistake. So I think allowing to step back and allow some natural consequences, but then also to have some non-negotiables. Like there are some non-negotiables. And then if those non-negotiables are broken, then there is a very strict consequence. This happens. And for a teenager, you have to hit them where it hurts. That might be they have to pay for their cell phone. That might be they don't get the car. That might be, you know, a lot of things. You can't control where they go after school. You can't control if they go to school. If they fail and they have to go to summer school, that's a natural consequence. Or they broke a non-negotiable, which you should not have more than 2 or 3. A few very important non-negotiables, that's it. And if they break those, they lose the car. They lose their phone for a short period of time. And then they feel uncomfortable. That wasn't very nice. I don't want to do that again. You know, I didn't obviously talk about drugs and alcohol, you know, and mental illness. There's a lot of factors that go into this. So kids often who are displaying this behavior also need some sort of therapeutic intervention. But as from the parenting side, that's what I found that it's really helpful.
I really appreciate it. Thanks. And just to quickly follow up about drugs and alcohol, vaping is pervasive in the public high schools. So it's just a whole other, Yeah.
Well, the bully that was on the bus that was kicking my son was vaping in like 7th grade on the bus. You know, it's in middle schools as much as it is high schools. Yeah.
Catherine, thank you so much. This was awesome. Parenting is not getting easier. We are, you know, parents are dealing with more and more things that they have to feel and figure out how to address that with their children. And your words and your thoughts and your expertise really resonated tonight. Awesome. I hope that everybody here took one thing away from tonight's conversation and tonight's presentation. And we at Shoki JFS, I'm the Chief Program Officer. I work with Brooke and Matt to make sure that we are providing the most support that we can for the community. So if tonight, you know, brought up ideas or things that you think that you and other parents might want to hear or want to have other expert presentations, we want to be able to provide that. So please reach out. We're here for you. We want to support you in all of your life transitions with your children and with your families. And again, just a final thank you to Catherine for being with us tonight. And thank you for that Facebook post and your daughter. And we wish her all the best, but so glad that we got connected to you that way and that you were able to come to our community. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Do you want to pick a winner for the book?
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So our random picker with a raffle picker picked number 10, and Gail Karolitz, who was on earlier, was the winner. She was the 10th person to respond to your question, Catherine, about her son. And so we will be in touch with Gail to email her and make sure we can send her your book.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And we look forward to welcoming you back in the future to do more conversations like tonight, to just keep us uplifted and moving one step at a time forward, because that's what it's about.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.